All right. Well, hey, welcome to Deep Dive Week 15, Knowing Jesus. We are cruising right along. Today, we're going to be in a story that my son loves. We have the Jesus Storybook Bible, and he'll ask us to read the story of the guy whose daughter was sick.
Yeah.
And
This is one of my daughter's favorites too. She loves this story. It's true.
Yeah. So anyway, Pastor Terry, we've got him with us again as we're going to kind of go through this account. And before we kind of get into the passage, we're going to be in Mark chapter 5. Before we get into that, I just wanted to ask Terry, how are you doing with the Knowing Jesus series? How are you feeling?
That's a great question. I've been loving it. I think as even reflecting on last week, just looking at Jesus, focusing on Jesus, there's so many distractions in our world. So this really helps us be able to do that and keep our eye focused on him. And it's just been really that people's response has been phenomenal from what people have said to me and encouraged and notes and what they want. They're like waiting for the book. That's what they're telling me. They're like, hey, we know it's a little work. Can you put it in a book? Well, we'll see about that.
There are some publishing companies that do that.
There are some publishing companies that do that. I think there's been a lot of books on Jesus, so I'm not sure we need another one and can't really outdo the Bible. But Fair. Really, I think it's been soothing, at least for my soul, to really focus on him. He's the author and perfecter of our faith, and there's ever a time to focus on him, it's now.
No, that's so good. And I do think, even how we're having this conversation again today, we're not in person. I'm not at the church. You're at the church.
I'm at the church.
We're doing this virtually because COVID numbers are, continue to rise. And we want to make sure that
we're healthy for Christmas.
That we're healthy for Christmas, that you're healthy for the weekend. All of that. We want to do whatever we can to, whatever our responsibility is in this. And
right.
I do think that I was reflecting a little bit earlier today, just kind of on the craziness that 2020 has been, the pandemic. We're still in it, and yet whenever we approach these stories, when I read about Jesus, I was thinking last week, he shows power over, the storm. He calms the storm. Like, he is the one who is powerful, capable. Nothing is catching him by surprise. And so, I don't know, that's just something that I'm daily. And this series has been helpful for me in that, just as that kind of real grounding, just to be focusing on Jesus, who he was, what he was doing in ministry. And just to be reminded that, he is not just he's raised himself from the dead, right? But he has raised others from the dead. He has shown time and time again, he is powerful and he's capable.
So we sing that death cannot hold him. That's part of what we sing. And that's what I love. There's something about walking through these stories together, because we see the power of Jesus, in the midst of the storm. The disciples are terrified. It's like, whoa, he's got way more power. He goes across to the other side in kind of a Gentile area, takes the demons out of this guy. I mean, that's another power encounter. But then he comes back, and there's so much gentleness and tenderness in this story. And so almost these two extremes of Jesus. And I think that's helpful to see. And a good reminder for us, how does Jesus use his power? How do we use our power? Whatever power and authority we've been given, there's a call for us to how to use that.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Well, let's just get into it then. So chapter 5 of Mark's gospel, starting in verse, where are we at? 21. Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side. A great crowd gathered about him. So it's kind of almost coming on the coattails of last week, right? We see this crowd, we see him going to the other side. He was beside the sea, and then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet. Do we know anything about Jairus other than what's given here?
Yeah, we don't know anything specifically, but we can presume a number of things. I mean, the ruler of the synagogue was necessarily a priest, but he was the one who would organize all the events and details, decide who was going to read scripture, everything. So, the people who were there in the synagogue would have had wealth. So he was obviously a very influential, wealthy, significant person. We're pretty sure that that's the case. I think we can presume, this is most likely Capernaum or in the area. Jesus had done other miracles. He'd done other miracles on the Sabbath. Jairus had probably witnessed these. So, he comes to Jesus because he knows that. Jesus is also now being rejected. It's a year popularity by people, but he's beginning to be rejected. He's going to be kicked out of the synagogue. He did stuff on the Sabbath, on the synagogue. People were not happy with him. And so I think we're going to see here that Jairus is risking something. And that's where there's two stories couldn't be two more different people and yet so similar in the same way. The story are almost identical, which reminds us no matter where we come from, we all have the same needs and same wants and desires and problems. So when he comes and he kneels before Jesus, he is humbling himself, and this could be life-changing for him because we don't know what others are going to say, but he is willing to risk everything for his little girl. And that's what when he says to Jesus about my little girl, she's about to become a woman. She's 12, but it's her, Luke says it's her only daughter. It's his only daughter. There's this real tenderness that he has.
Yeah. And so he sees him, he falls at his feet, and he implores him earnestly, right? There's this
Right.
idea of this isn't just a trivial request, right? He's all in. He is imploring Jesus, my little daughter is at the point of death. Now we don't know, I guess, fully the illness or the sickness that she's wrestling with, but
yeah, we don't know. And then this is one of those interesting passages because it's in Mark's gospel, Luke's gospel, and Matthew's gospel. And Matthew, it generally kind of rushes through things. The others give a little more detail. And I think Luke gives a bit more detail. Like she's tried everything, all the doctor, like he writes from the doctor's perspective. And it's like she's run out. She's spent all her money on all these different treatments and has kind of run out. The interesting thing is Matthew's gospel, the English says, when Jairus comes, my daughter's dead. In Luke and Mark, it's my daughter is near death. Or is very sick. And so this causes a lot of interesting problems, for Bible scholars and people with the narrative. What is happening? What's going on? How do we explain what's happening here?
Yeah. So when we talked about some textual criticism a few weeks ago, we said that most times the meaning of the passage is not in question, right? When there are subtle disagreements or variants, in the text. With this one, again, I would probably say the meaning of it is not fully in question. Obviously, you have a girl who's gravely sick, the point of it, but how do we reconcile that? I guess yeah.
Well, and that's a good question because in this case, probably the textual criticism doesn't help because there's not differing words and differing copies to kind of go, okay, what's the majority saying? So that doesn't help. So there's several ways, looking and understanding a passage depending on how the author wrote. A very similar story. So the words Mark uses for kind of near death, the phrase that Matthew uses could also mean very close to death. So, is he really saying she's died, or is she saying, she's at death's door, or, almost going to die? There's some suggestion that she was so close to death that he presumed by time he left,
by the time he would get back, he would,
she would be dead. I think the better way of it is that those two phrases probably are, mean similar, like very close to death or almost dead. So that's what it could, the phrase could mean. That could mean has died or could mean very close to death. And that's probably the best. Some others suggest that Matthew is just fast forwarding the story and kind of, that knowing she's going to die, that he's presumed she's probably dead already.
So. Yeah. The pragmatic of the focus is not that she is dead or close to death. The focus is that Jesus is going to do a miracle here, and she is going to be restored to full life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, so Jairus comes and he says, "Come and lay your hands on her." Now, I wanted to ask you about this phrase. Throughout the New Testament, we read about the apostles, the laying on of hands. Why would Jairus have asked Jesus to come and lay his hands on her? Like, is that just an expression? Is there something in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we see Jesus using touch a lot. So I think he probably had witnessed Jesus do that. The story that we looked at a few weeks ago, the account of Jesus and the widow's son and the widow of Nain, and he touched the funeral bier. There's something about the power
Mm-hmm.
of touch, and I think they saw Jesus do that, and he often would touch the untouchable
Mm-hmm.
people, and he did that, which is we covered a little bit of that. Just it's interesting in COVID how we have lost touch with people, and people were
Yeah.
being trained to stay away and not touch. And what are we missing even from that sense of
Yeah.
touch?
Yeah, no, that's good, and I do think there's something here that Mark is going to do in terms of juxtaposing the two stories,
Right.
right? And the power of Jesus's um, intentional touch, right? The laying on of his hands, or at least what Jairus is asking for,
Yeah,
and the woman who is going to
touch him.
touch Jesus. Yeah,
And then Jesus touches the body, the
yeah,
little girl. Yeah.
yeah, and almost, I mean, Jesus, I think correct me if I'm wrong, he's doing something even to subvert the whole notion of like what makes someone unclean, right? Because
Right.
you're going to
Right.
see, I mean, this woman, right, with the discharge, she is ceremonially, uh, ceremoniously, she is unclean in that impure, and then and the girl, if she is dead, right, she is unclean, and so even that whole handling there. So anyway, so Jairus comes, he comes to Jesus. He says, "Hey, please come, come lay your hands on my daughter so that she will be well, so that she will live." And in verse 24, we see Jesus went with him. So
And immediately, I mean, I think this
yes.
is what, like, he doesn't delay. He doesn't say, "Hey, I'm busy." Like immediately, and again, what his responsiveness in
Hmm.
this passage, again, this person with all authority, he's so responsive. I'm going to go. I'm going to come to your house. I'm going to be there. I'm going to do as you say.
Yeah. And I love, I don't have the Greek in front of me, so I can't really see, but I love how Mark, the way he describes action, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and this happened, and this happened, and then this
Right.
happened, and this happened, and this happened. And you do get this idea that one, Jesus was very busy, but that he, yeah, immediately he's like, all right, let's go.
Right.
So anyway, the great crowd followed him, um, thronged about him.
Right.
So there is this. He is in the midst of this large pack, right? So, and that's going to become very relevant for what's about to happen. Because Jesus is so present in the moment that he, even in the midst of this crowd kind of jostling around him, he is aware that something's about to happen.
Right.
So, verse 25, and there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. Um, that's a long time.
Yeah. Well, it's the same length as this little girl had lived. For all the
Mm,
life of this little girl,
wow.
this woman had suffered the same, pain. This little girl had her whole life, and now this woman had been suffering. And in many
Yeah.
ways, they're both kind of terminal. This little girl was terminal. This issue seemed terminal. It wasn't changing no matter what she'd done, who she'd gone, spent all her money. I mean, so the complete here we
Yeah.
have a rich and powerful person and
Wow.
versus who is at the top of the society in many ways, and then we have someone who's impoverished, rejected. Her husband could have rejected her because of this situation. She was
Hmm.
alone. She had no money, unclean. Couldn't go to worship, and so at both Jesus has this compassion for complete opposite ends of the spectrum.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's so good. I love that you highlighted there that 12 years. Like
Yeah.
again, the intentionality of Mark to document this, the even what's happening here. And yeah, it
And
just
12 is kind of a number of completion. It's finished. 12 apostles, 12 tribes, 12. in a sense of this little girl, her childhood was completed, now moving on to adulthood. This woman is almost the sense, okay, this 12 years, this is going to be done. It's done,
Mm-hmm.
that piece is completed.
Mm. So then there's a description, right? She'd suffered under many physicians. She had spent all the money that she had. She wasn't getting any better. In fact, she was getting worse. She had heard reports about Jesus. She comes up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment, right? So there's that action that we were talking about. She, lays her hand right on his cloak. For she said, if I even touch his garments, I will be made well. Right. So there's this demonstration of faith on this woman.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's it. Jesus has always seemed to be rejoicing and excited about faith. That's what, what amazes him has always been the faith of the centurion, the faith of people in following him. And here, he responds to Jairus's faith and responds to this woman's faith. There's something about that, again, this energy that whatever happened, he knew, which is, we are not just the crowd, we're individuals. So that's what's so powerful, I think, in the story. He sees everyone.
And immediately the flow of blood dried up, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing else that needed to be done. Like immediately, I don't know. That's just something that's so striking, because I think whenever we think of healing, a lot of times healing is gradual. And yet with Jesus, the healing, as we're going to see both with this woman and with, the daughter, like it's immediate.
Yeah, and I will say there are some things in the Bible I visualize and love to visualize, where, assuming perhaps this is menstrual bleeding, this is not one of those things. This is like, I'm like, okay, I don't even want to delve into how did everybody know? How did they understand? Did she exclaim that? Who knows what her real condition was? How did people know that there was something obvious that happened?
Yeah, and I do think with her, I mean, even the course of action in this story, right? Before something happens, it's almost like she's giving an interview, right? She is,
right.
She was kind of talking about her rationale for going and touching Jesus's garment before Jesus even responds, before the disciples or his followers would have even engaged. It's not like she's walking up and saying, if I only touch his garment, then I will be well. It's like almost done in not secrecy, but like in subtle. She's like, I just got to get to Jesus and do this.
Right.
So I almost wonder if Peter was like talking with her afterwards, if he's interviewing her, like, hey, what happened? How did you know? How did this, and so maybe that's the, with that. And it says, and immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself, again, there's that like self-awareness. He's present in the moment, that power had gone out from him. He immediately turned about in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? His disciples said to him, you see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, who touched me? Right? Like the disciples, they're kind of like,
and we're going to see this. People mocked it, like they're laughing, they're mocking him. And we're going to see the crowd in a bit. But here, the close people can't believe, right? Yeah. Don't always trust him, and I think we sometimes think, oh yeah, the crowd's going to, laugh at Jesus. But are there things we say, oh, that can't be? What is that? What are the things that we go, that can't be? Jesus, you can't know that. You can't do that. Where is our bit of little faith? Because she's going to show them so much more.
Yeah. And I love his compassionate response and posture to this woman. He says, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace, be healed of your disease. There's this, again, that Mark is doing something very intentional here at, you have Jairus's daughter, and then you have Jesus referring to this woman as daughter.
Yeah. And this is the only time that Jesus calls someone daughter. It's the only time. I mean, we talked, a few weeks back, we called someone woman, and it's, when he called his mom a woman, was that disrespectful? What is that endearing?
Yeah.
He didn't say woman. He said my daughter. And so obviously I think he's connecting the heart of Jairus with his daughter. I mean, just the desperation of love and willing to do anything with Jesus' love for us. And he feels the same, as Jairus did. He feels the same for us. And again, we probably like, oh, he can't. I'm one of the crowd. We do what the disciples do. No, 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 no. He sees us.
Hmm.
We are one intimate with him.
Yeah. Yeah. So while this scene is playing out, someone from Jairus's household, messenger comes and gives the news that your daughter is dead.
Right.
I can't even imagine, right? As a father of a little girl, I can't imagine getting that news.
Right, right. While Jesus is stopped, and I think here,
Yeah.
and there's like he was talking, he continued to talk, I think it said while he was talking. So I don't know, it's silent here about why did Jesus delay, but also what was Jairus thinking? Was he glad Jesus was helping this woman, or was he so angry at,
Yeah.
I know how I would be. I would be hugely impatient. Come on, Jesus, we don't have time. Yeah, who touched me? We don't care, Jesus, my daughter.
Yeah, that inner angst that I'm sure Jairus was feeling. Like he doesn't want to
Right.
disrespect Jesus because he needs something from Jesus, but at the same time, like, hey, let's go. This matters. This is
And I think he had such faith, just what Jesus is responding to
yeah.
his faith. And then he gets this news, and Jesus is like, well, don't worry, keep believing, keep
Uh-huh.
trying, don't worry. But I think
Yeah.
that's Jairus was wrestling. I think it's part of what Jesus was doing, talking, looking at the limits of our faith. What is our faith in, and what do we believe? And here
Mm.
Jesus is going to test that and stretch it.
Mm-hmm. So the messenger, he asks Jairus, hey, why trouble
Right.
the teacher, right? Any further? Jesus, he overhears it, and he says, "Do not fear, only believe."
Right.
Which I've heard something like that before, and there are times when it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I need to believe and I need to have faith, but at the same time, like this is actually happening too. And again, right to your point, Jesus is like what is highlighted here is the faith that Jairus has, and then even when the situation appears to have changed, Jesus is still calling him to that
Faith.
same faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do we, and that's, we talk a little bit about that. That's a hard thing in our culture. Not every miracle is going to happen. How do we believe and expect God to do things, but
Mhm,
somehow hold that loosely? Jesus in the garden, not my will, but
mhm.
yours. Here's what I want, but I'm expressing it. I'm believing. I believe that you can do this, but I believe if you don't, you still have the best for me, and
Yeah,
that's a big challenge.
yeah. So Jesus, he does something here that's a little interesting to me. Um, we've seen him do miracles in the presence of a crowd before,
Right.
and yet Jesus says, "Hey, listen, still like believe, have faith." But he allowed no one else to follow except for Peter, James, and John. Why do you think that
Yeah.
is?
Well, and again, there's this interesting, the comparison and contradiction of these stories. There was that, a very private issue Jesus healed publicly. Here, this very public issue, your daughter has died, Jesus is going to deal with privately.
Yeah.
So, he works in both extreme, and sometimes we have to allow God to work where he's going to work. Um, why did he not want to do that? It's a great question. Um, because when he says she's asleep, are people going to go, oh, well, she was really sick. He just healed her. Are they going to believe he raised from the dead? I think Jesus, he's always about resurrection and life. This
Mhm,
woman, right? It's almost like she's healed from the issue of blood, but she gets much more. There's a sense that she gets a fullness of life, even now that she
mhm,
didn't have before, because of Jesus. I I think part of me goes, Jesus didn't want to just continue to be the spectacle.
mm,
He didn't do miracles for the spectacle of it. He did it for the individual and the person, and wanted to really, just not be a person who's all about the miracles. He's all about his teaching, and that's what you see. It's all about the Word of God. He wants people to know the coming of the kingdom, and so I think he's trying to just protect the integrity of his ministry here by just doing something in private. And he's revealing something. I mean, these are the same three who see him, as we're going to see next month at the Mount of Transfiguration. They're going to see Jesus in a different way. So I think he's intentionally, this is a season in his life where he's intentionally building into his disciples. And with these three, he's showing them really who he is, his authority and power and grace and mercy.
Yeah, and so Jesus, he comes on this scene. He saw a commotion, is what the text says.
Right.
People are weeping and wailing, right? So they're already mourning. This is like true grief. And
are they professional mourner? You know, there were people who are paid high. You know, were they already there? You know, to do that.
Yeah, and so Jesus, he makes this statement. He says, "The child is not dead, but she's sleeping."
Right.
And they have a response. They laugh at him. They're kind of like, I think we would know if she was dead, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, it was a similarity between the previous story. The disciples kind of laughed and mocked. Oh, Jesus, how can you know that one person touched you? But here, the crowd now mocks him, right? And laughs at him. Oh, how can you be, not asleep? And fascinatingly, the scripture later, Paul talks about death as sleep, and kind of uses that as an image of what death is. But here he's, that's what is he saying, she's really asleep, or this is what death is. Death is not the end. And you had the whole issue between the Pharisees and the Sadducees about what death is and is there life after death. And again, Jesus is, we're not going to take a side. And, but he's on the side of resurrection. Like, she's sleeping. There is life after. And it's kind of a little bit of foreshadowing of his own resurrection, which again was done in private, not, there weren't crowds of people. I mean, that's one of the arguments for the resurrection of Jesus. If the disciples really expected him, there would have been a great crowd there on the third day. Hey, they're all going to come. Jesus said he's going to rise. They didn't rise. They didn't believe him. And Jesus rose privately, and there's this kind of very intimate private.
Yeah. And so we see that intimate, like that. There's a very intimate scene here where he takes her family, takes her father, her mother. He takes those that he had brought with him. And he goes into where the child was. And he, again, just the intimate nature here, he takes her by the hand and he says, Talitha Kumi, right? That's the Aramaic, little girl, I say to you, arise. And so I wanted to ask, before we get into he's speaking in Aramaic here. Why is Mark recording that in this passage? I don't know. What is Aramaic? Like we hear Greek, we hear Hebrew.
Yeah. There's a few times where it records what Jesus says in Aramaic. I mean, the classic one is when he's on the cross, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which, my God, why have you forsaken me? And why did the authors feel that was an important moment? That was Jesus' original language. That's the language that they talked, was Aramaic. I mean, we talk a lot about Greek, New Testament Greek, Koine Greek, which was kind of the common Greek. That's what this Bible was written in. The New Testament was written in, because that was the universal language at the time. So the disciples wrote that, obviously educated enough to know that. And Jesus there were probably several languages that he spoke, but Aramaic, this was kind of the common, this was what the Jewish people would have spoken to each other at the time.
Yeah.
And so he records that. I don't think it's not an incantation. It's just, little girl arise.
Yeah.
And, again, just the sweetness and the tenderness of just my little girl, little darling, here's the most powerful raising someone from the dead, and yet the most intimate.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And immediately she gets up, right? She begins to walk. And the all who are with him, right, are overcome with amazement.
Right. Jesus amazed at their faith of the woman and Jairus, and then they're amazed at this resuscitation, revitalization.
Yeah. And then in verse 43, he strictly charged them that no one should know this and told them to give her something to eat.
Yeah.
So there is like this, he is very aware of her personal needs in that moment.
Right, right.
But
Yeah.
but this isn't the first time that we've seen Jesus tell people, "Hey, don't
Don't tell
don't."
people. Yeah.
Why would he not want this to
Well,
be?
obviously they told at some point,
Yeah, yeah,
nobody
yeah. I mean,
know until, and Peter, James, and John obviously did, although it's not in John's gospel, which is interesting. He doesn't record this.
mhm,
Um, Again, I just think he's like, hey, people, we don't need, we don't, this is not why I've come. This is
yeah,
not a spectacle. These are just affirmation moments
mhm,
that what I say is true, that who I am
mm,
is true. And that was really more what he wanted people to know and understand.
mm. Man, so
Yeah.
good. So good. Yeah, such a sweet story. The comparison of Jesus is the same for both of these people. And yet he does two,
Right.
different things. And yeah, no, that's so
And
good.
how he treats us, how we are in the story. How does he see and treat us with the same care and compassion? Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, you wanna tease us a little bit for next week?
Well, we're taking a break from knowing Jesus. We're going to talk about Christmas
Ooh.
and just go back to his birth, since that's coming, and just talk about who he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we'll have to go
It's Christmas. It's hard to believe.
yeah, deep dive Christmas edition. Um, so awesome, Terry. Well, hey, that's good. This has been such a good
Yeah.
project. It's a good journey. I know for me, it's been refreshing. Hopefully, for others, it's been helpful as well.
I
Uh,
hope
just a reminder, you can find more of our deep dive resources on our YouTube channel or on our website, calvary.church/knowing Jesus. We post these to Instagram TV as well. And so, however you find them, we hope that it's beneficial to you. We have more resources on our website as well, some Finding Jesus discussions, and yeah, some other things as well. So anyway, it's been good, and we will catch you next time.
so. All right. Take care.